Before adding a competency framework in Total Perform, you'll need to ensure you've created a competency scale. Competency scales help to define how well a user can perform a skill, task, or behaviour. Competency scales allow managers to track and mark users' progress against the competencies they are assigned. To create a competency scale, go to the Competencies area of your site. You'll see any scales that have been previously set up here. Total Perform includes a default competency scale. You are able to use the default scale for any frameworks you add to the system if it is appropriate to your needs. The default scale contains 3 levels which can highlight the degree to which an individual is able to perform a competency. If you were to create your own scale, you could add as many levels as you required. The Learning Plan default value allows you to define where a user would start on the scale. So, if this competency appears in the user's learning plan, they would start with this value. If you are new to an organisation, you might start at Not Competent for all your competencies. The minimum required proficiency value shows where on the scale a user needs to be considered proficient for the associated competency. In this case, a user would only be considered proficient if they achieve the rating of competent. In this default scale, there is only one proficient value, but I could decide to change this and make competent with supervision the minimum value. If I save and apply my changes, you can see that there are now 2 proficient values in this scale. If you'd like to edit the scale, you can do this by clicking on the cog where you'll be able to add different names to the scale values. Now that we've had a look at the default scale, let's focus on creating a completely new one. To do that, we'll go back to the main Competencies area and choose Add a new competency scale. I'll give the scale a name, and then I'm able to enter the scale values into the system with 1 value per line. You're able to add a description to provide more detail if you wish. I'll save changes to add my new scale to the system. I'm taken straight to the new scale to make further changes if needed. I'll set the Learning Plan default value as Consistent. I want both Excelling and Strong to be considered proficient, so I'll change the minimum required proficiency value, and save to implement my changes. Another feature of scales is that you can provide a numerical value to each scale item, which you could use to generate reports or highlight users' competencies in other quantitative ways. If you wanted to do this, simply edit the scale entry and enter the numerical value. I'll save my changes to return to the scale. Of course, I'd want to edit each entry in the scale with its own numerical value. You're also able to change the order of the scale by using the arrows if you need to. So that's how to create and edit a competency scale in Total Perform. Once you've set up your scale, you're ready to create your framework.